A fun fact I learned just recently about Anacapa Island, it's sometimes called the Galapagos of North America because of the large diversity of plants and animals. So that is a scenic swim, but that's a great training swim as well because it's about 11 miles and you're going to get different situations with the winds and the current because, you're going around the island. The temperature is usually pretty decent on that one, probably mid to high 60s, depending on the time of year.
Another thing worth mentioning, if you're used to swimming along shore in California, so swimming off of LA or Ventura or Santa Barbara, the water clarity that you experience out at the islands is something different entirely. The water is so clear out there. You can be out at Anacapa and you might be able to see 50 feet down, right? And I think given the unique geography of that island, kelp forests and fish, I think it's a pretty unique experience being out there.
Don't forget the arch. Everyone loves the arch. Hello, and welcome to the Ultraswimming podcast, where we have conversations about swimming long distances across wild, open bodies of water with little more than a textile swimsuit, cap, and goggles. I'm Jessica Kiris, co-hosting the podcast with Evan Morrison. Evan, can you go ahead and introduce our guest today?
Yeah, so we're very lucky today to have Karina Garcia as our guest. Karina is a Southern California native. She is currently based in Ventura, California. She is a board member of the Santa Barbara Channel Swimming Association, and recently, last fall, became the new course record holder for Santa Rosa Island to the California mainland, which is the longest route across the Santa Barbara Channel. So in today's episode, we'll cover Karina and her swim, but also what it's like to swim in the California Channel Islands area. All three of us have done major swims in the Channel Islands. And also we'll talk about the Santa Barbara Channel Swimming Association and what it does. And this is something that Karina and I have also both been involved in. So Karina, you're living in Ventura, and that's kind of ideally located for doing lots of swimming in the Channel Islands area. And you've built up over the past 10 years or so, starting with the Catalina Channel swim in 2016, and then Anacapa one way in both directions, and then a Santa Cruz Island to mainland swim, an Anacapa double. You're one of the very few people that do an Anacapa double, and then of course last fall you're a Santa Rosa to the mainland swim. So you could just tell us a little about how you got into open water and marathon swimming, and tell us a bit about the community there in Ventura, and what keeps you coming back every year for more swims in the Channel Islands.
Well, thanks for that introduction. So I swam through high school. I didn't swim in college. I kind of got frustrated and needed a break. So I came back to it in my early 20s. Just, it's a good exercise. I enjoy swimming. It's really the only form of exercise I really enjoy. And I started training with the Ventura County Masters. And on that team, there's a group of people who had done open water and channel crossings. So I started swimming with Jim McConaughey and some of his friends and doing longer distance sets. And actually, as one of my teammates before that, just saying, hey, I think with the way you swim, you would like to do longer distance. So I started with the 1 hour postal swim and thought like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe I just swam for an hour straight. I'm biggest burrito for lunch today. Like, I'm so proud of myself. And then that same person nudged me towards doing the Semana Nautica 6-miler. So that's kind of how I got started. And my first swim in the ocean was after a Saturday morning workout. And a few of the swimmers were going to go to the beach afterwards, and they invited me along. And I was not really into the idea. I was kind of scared, but I didn't want to show it. So I went with them, got in, we did a little swim. And I just remember that day like feeling so cool, like, wow, I just swam in the ocean. And then I was hooked and just thought, well, I'm definitely not a sprinter. I don't like to do meets. I hate meets. So I like the idea of just trying to swim for a long time. And from where I live, I see Anacapa and Santa Cruz every day. So it's kind of hard to resist. But yeah, my first swim was Catalina. And I felt like I could take that on because of the group I was training with. I had people with experience. They gave me a plan. They were on my boat. So that's how I got started.
And what do you call it? They're called the deep enders, right?
Yeah, we have the nickname the Deep Enders because we have our main swim team group and there's a regular workout, but then there's a group of us who come up with distance workouts. So Jim and I Jim and I come up with the sets. It used to be just Jim. Now we consult daily about what we want to do the next day. We just like to focus on longer sets, keeping a solid pace, doing things like, a bunch of 400s on an interval, trying to hold our fastest pace possible or descend. And then pretty much everyone who swims with us also does ocean swimming. So it's about the open water as well, and now training for these bigger swims. And it was pretty cool because last year we had 6 other people, so 7 including me, training for a channel swim. So most of them, 6 of them did Anacapa, and 5 of them trained with me regularly at the pool and then at the ocean. So we definitely have a good group, and I know I'm really fortunate because not every person who does marathon swims has a big group of people to train with. And it's really nice because it can be very boring and grueling. So it's fun to have people to suffer with.
For sure. I think I've gone through times when I've had a good group and I've gone through times when I don't, and the difference is massive. Yeah, so another aspect of Karina's participation in the sport, she is a board member of the Santa Barbara Channel Swimming Association. The SBCSA it's a little bit of a misnomer because I think just geographically the channel between Anacapa, Santa Cruz, Santa Rosa, and San Miguel is called the Santa Barbara Channel. So the SBCSA doesn't indicate anything specific about the city of Santa Barbara. It's just kind of the name of the channel there. So I was involved for about 12 or 13 years with the SBCSA, and then kind of retired after moving to Australia. But I think it was awesome getting to know Karina and kind of recruit her into the SBCSA. I honestly don't know much about what's going on nowadays, and I'm hoping Karina can update us. So, like, what is the SBCSA? What are you guys up to nowadays?
Well, I joined in 2021. I remember getting a text from you asking if I was interested, and I was so excited. And it has been really fun being a part of the board because I really enjoy getting to connect with the swimmers just briefly, even if it's just over email, and seeing everyone's accomplishments. These days, we are trying to attract more swims, and we're trying to attract people to do more than, Anacapa is our most popular swim. This year, it was all Anacapas. We had 21 completed swims,
Sorry,
and
what is
19 of those.
Anacapa for those who don't know? When you say Anacapa swims, what does that mean?
Oh, yeah. So swimming from Anacapa Island to Oxnard, the finish is usually in Oxnard, California, so Silver Strand or Hollywood Beach, and that's about a 12-mile swim. And I know you guys speak in kilometers, but I still don't.
I don't speak in kilometers either yet. I'm working on that skill. So what's that water like for people listening? When I did the Anacapa swim, there was a lot of cross current compared with the Catalina swim, which is longer but less weird water, I think.
Yeah. Anacapa can definitely be a challenge, and people who have done longer swims or 20-mile swims might think, oh, it's just 12 miles, and I'm guilty of that myself. Oh, it's just 12 miles. It's fine. I'll be fine. But you never know what you're going to get. Obviously, with any open water swim, you never know what you're going to get. Depends on the day. But Anacapa can be surprisingly challenging. It's definitely on the cooler side more regularly than Catalina. So in the warmest time of year, it can get up to 70, and that's really nice. But a lot of people do their swims and it's in the lower 60s. It can be rough water, just really gray, ugly days out there. But you do usually get visited by a pod of dolphins, so that's pretty fun. Anacapa is our most popular swim, and a lot of people, I think it's gotten more attention in the last few years because people are trying to complete the California Triple Crown, which is the Catalina Channel length of Lake Tahoe, and then one of the Santa Barbara channels. So it doesn't have to be Anacapa, but that is what most people choose. And I believe that Evan and Dave came up with that challenge. Is that correct?
Yeah, that was back in I think 2017, and at that point, there had only been Kevin Murphy and Tina Neal and Dave who'd done it, and then now we're up to I think 40, almost 40 who've done all 3 swims, and I think it's been a boon for interest in Anacapa swims, but also even more so I think for Lake Tahoe swims. Like there've been a ton of. Probably more Lake Tahoe swims than would have been done otherwise.
Yeah. On the application now, I've added a question like, will this potentially complete your California Triple Crown? Because, I do the social media posts after the swim and I want to acknowledge that.
Oh, nice.
And so that helps me keep track. And then, of course, we refer to Long Swims database and the swimmer's application. But that's just something for me to make note of so I can remember that during the post.
Karina, so you were saying that the SBCSA is interested in attracting more Anacapa swims, but also more swims from other islands. Do you want to say a little bit more about that?
Well, we just have so many options. And, we have the four Northern Channel Islands, the Santa Cruz, there's two different routes there. You could do between the islands. I know Jane and John, two of our current board members, they did between Santa Cruz and Anacapa. They did that there and back, which is a total of 8 miles. So a fun swim. Amy Gubser, who's also on our board, one of her favorite swims, she said, is the around Anacapa because it's so beautiful and there's so much to see, which is one I haven't done. I'm actually not so interested in it after being on so many boats where there's all the little sea lions playing and jumping. I was on a swim and they were literally following the swimmer for like an hour and a half, just going over and under. But I really need to do that one because, why not? And relays. So after COVID, the relays kind of fell off. But there's so many great options for relays. And so we're trying to attract relays again. We haven't had a relay since before 2020. I almost got a group of local swimmers this year to do it, but then the leader the organizer had some issues, hurt her ankle or something, and so that fell off. But I can try them again.
Just stepping back a little bit, what does the SBCSA do? Like, what is their role in the sport? How do they facilitate swims? I know you charge, SBCSA charges, like most sanctioned organizations, they charge a fee to sanction the swim. And what do the swimmers get for that fee? What's the advantage of going through the SBCSA as opposed to just going out and swimming on your own?
So we sanction all the swims in the Channel Islands except for the Catalina ones. And so when someone applies to our organization, will review the application, make sure they have some experience, that they know what they're getting into. So that's an advantage of going through an organization is you do get to connect with people who are experienced and maybe give you some tips. Sometimes we'll see people who will ask them to do the Nautical 6-miler. So if they don't have any real marathon swim experience, that's kind of a good first step. So they get connected to people who have knowledge about the sport. They get an observer. So we'll provide an observer who will keep the log, make sure all the rules are followed, and their swim will be recorded. I mean, personally, I think, I'm working really hard for this. It hurts. It's difficult. I put a lot of time into it. I want my name to be written down somewhere. I know that it's official, it's recorded. And then we have our banquet. So our swimmers that have a successful swim, we can celebrate them at our annual banquet. They get a certificate. And Evan started the whole providing the certificate with the map and the GPS plot from their swim. And we've been able to continue that. John now does them. But that's been such an awesome thing to give to swimmers to see their plots. So they get that recognition at the banquet.
Yeah, I think to me, another big aspect of going through the organization is I just think it's safer.
Yeah, with safety.
I think, the Catalina Channel is a good comparison. I think the conditions are relatively more consistent. The weather's a little more stable down there. But I think the organization down there is really strong, and I think that they've prevented a lot of potential disasters just by having really experienced people on board as an observer, and also their pilots that have seen everything out there, and they can see things happening before they become dangerous. And I think further north, where the SBCSA is active, the further north you go in the Channel Islands region, the weather gets worse, the conditions are a little hairier, and especially like Santa Rosa, where Karina, you just swam last year, and San Miguel, it can get a little dicey. And I think it helps to have people there who've seen it before. Rather than just going out as a swimmer and you've never been out there, you have no idea what you're getting into, potentially have a pilot who's never been out there. As a swimmer, I think I feel a lot better having people supporting me who've been there a few times. And I think the SBCSA and similar organizations, they compile a lot of experience over many years and different people that helps ensure that this potentially life-threatening activity is as safe as possible. So, Karina, you've been involved a few years now. I'm sure you've been out there, and you've seen things that could have gone sideways, but maybe they didn't. And you don't have to, give any specifics or anything, but would you agree with that?
Yeah, for sure. And just having, our observers, we're there to make sure the rules are followed and keep the log, but we are also supporting the swimmer and we want to see them succeed. So we're going to also cheer them on and provide those tips if needed to keep everyone safe and try to make it a successful swim.
So in my experience on the board, we get a lot of incoming questions, and some of them from people who really don't have any experience, and they're interested in the Channel Islands region, but don't know much about it. And I'm wondering if you have a few kind of common questions that you get coming in, and what are the answers to those, just for people who might be maybe curious about doing swims.
So we do get questions. I usually am pretty quick to respond, and I do want to support people. I've even just taken calls with people if they're curious about swimming around here. And a lot of times it's just kind of general. I've had a phone call with someone several weeks ago, and she has some 10K experience, but doesn't really know what it's like to organize a swim like this, going to the island and back. So just basic steps there, like what's the order of operations? When do I get the boat? When do I put in the application? Just kind of some basic things like that. Because if you've done K races, well, everything's set up for you. And then here, it's like, well, it's not an event that takes place on one day where everyone just shows up. So there's quite a bit you have to organize, even though you are going through the organization. But I've definitely had phone calls with people, just like giving them basic information about the temperature and the conditions and what it could look like. Or if they've done enough training.
Okay, so let's pretend I'm a swimmer, and I heard of somebody doing the crossing from Anacapa to Oxnard, and I thought, wow, I wonder if that's something I could do. So I send you a message through the website, and I let you guys know I'm interested. I call the boat pilot and put my deposit in, get my swim date, do the application, train with my friends or maybe my master's team. And then is there anything else I would do before showing up on the day of my swim? What else do I need to bring people with me? Do I need to, you guys provide any equipment or nutrition or things like that? What else do I need to do as a swimmer? And what do you guys do on the day of the swim? What do I do?
Yeah, so as the board, we'll provide the observer, and then we have our observer kit, which has all the safety equipment. We even have an AED on board, heaven forbid we have to use that. But then the swimmer is responsible for their crew. So if they want to have a kayaker, they need to have their crew chief. There is a minimum number of crew. We need the swimmer to have at least one person who's going to be on board the whole time and paying attention to the swimmer, someone who knows the swimmer, who, can see if something's wrong. I mean, the observer's there for that too, but it's really beneficial for the swimmer to have someone who really knows them, knows their style, and knows when something's off. And then, of course, the swimmer's responsible for their own nutrition and all of that. And we will, as a board, we'll support swims without a kayaker as well. But we do have some pilots who prefer the swimmer to have a kayaker. So that's something the swimmer should check in with the pilot about, because I know we had a swimmer who wanted to go without a kayaker, but the captain required that. So that is a good tip as well for swimmers to check what the pilot's preferences are in terms of support.
Thank you. That's a great answer.
All right, so moving into the California Channel Islands as a geographic region, I think it's a really interesting area of the world, and I think it also makes it a really interesting place to swim. The Channel Islands are a national park, so the national park encompasses San Miguel Island, Santa Rosa Island, most of Santa Cruz Island, but not all of it, and Anacapa and Santa Barbara Island. There are two islands that are way offshore, San Clemente and San Nicolas, that are owned by the United States Navy. And then there's Catalina Island, which is kind of the most developed. It's part of the Channel Islands, but the swims around Catalina and from Catalina to the mainland are sanctioned by a different organization, Catalina Channel Swimming Federation. So, but anyway, the Channel Islands is just an enormous region. So in the furthest south it goes, San Clemente Island, the climate is similar to kind of what you would get in Orange County or even parts of San Diego. And you go all the way up to the other end of the region in San Miguel Island, and the weather out there is honestly more similar to what you'd get out of the Farallon Islands in San Francisco than what you would be used to in LA. So it's just an incredibly diverse in terms of its climate and water conditions, and it just makes the possibilities of swimming endless. So that's kind of the overview, and we're going to talk about the different swim opportunities that are available in the Channel Islands kind of in order, starting with the most beginner friendly and going into the more advanced type of routes. Karina, if a swimmer comes to you and they have done some 10Ks and they're looking to get up into some serious ocean swimming, some kind of a channel swim, what would you suggest that they start with?
Anacapa is definitely our most popular swim, and I think it is a great step up from a 10K and a great swim if you're training for something like Catalina. And in fact, a lot of our swimmers, that's their progression. They have done a 10K, they do Anacapa, and they're training for Catalina. Sometimes their Anacapa ends up being a little harder than their Catalina because of the conditions, but it's a great training swim. So definitely Anacapa.
And I think even like a 10K swim could be considered a pretty legitimate training swim, especially if you do a couple of them back to back. For Anacapa, which is essentially a 20K. So two 10Ks in a row, and you get an Anacapa swim. What about around Anacapa? I think it's a little shorter than the Channel crossing, but it's also all offshore, right? So what are kind of the challenges of that one?
Yeah, well, a fun fact I learned just recently about Anacapa Island, this isn't totally related to your question, but it's sometimes called the Galapagos of North America because of the large diversity of plants and animals. So that is a more scenic swim because you can see some of the animals. And I have seen that myself being on the boat for a lot of those swims, kind of playfully approaching the swimmer, nothing serious. But that's a great training swim as well because it's about 11 miles and you're going to get different situations with the winds and the current because, you're going around the island. The temperature is usually pretty decent on that one, probably mid to high 60s, depending on the time of year.
Another thing worth mentioning, if you're used to swimming along shore in California, so swimming off of LA or Ventura or Santa Barbara, the water clarity that you experience out at the islands is something different entirely. The water is so clear out there, and I guess it's just that there's less of the pollution flowing out from the mainland or something. Whatever the case, you can be out at Anacapa and you might be able to see 50 feet down, right? And I think given the kind of unique geography of that island, seeing down, kelp forests and fish, and I think it's a pretty unique experience being out there and swimming around.
Don't forget the arch.
Yeah,
Everyone loves
Karina,
the arch.
there's does this tradition still happen? I know Dawn Brooks always liked to go, like she'd like to run the swims from the mainland out to Anacapa, and then when they finish, they get to reward themselves and swim through the arch. Does that still happen?
Yeah, Captain Dawn would do that. And I was actually on a swim, even though she's retired now. She piloted one swim this past season. My friend Stacy's around Anacapa swim. And she offered us that option and we turned it down. Lame. But she was still up to do it.
And so another feature of these northern four islands, so Anacapa, Santa Cruz, Santa Rosa, San Miguel, is that they're all kind of close together out there. So you could actually swim, and a few people have swum between the two of them, and they're anywhere, I think, between 4 or 5 miles and 6 or 7 miles. Do you have much interest in those swims from people nowadays? I don't know if people, I guess Jane and John did that, right, Karina?
Yeah, there's really not much interest in those island hopper swims. I know a couple, in the Northern Channel Islands, but I think part of it is we're not really broadcasting that information. Personally, I think it's a lot of money for a shorter swim like that, hiring the boat and everything. So to me, it's not worth it. I don't know if that should be included.
I still want to go tandem with you on one because then we can split the cost.
Oh, yeah, we talked about that.
Or
yeah.
we could even get a couple other people and then split the cost and then have it be like a group swim of people around the same speed and maybe other people listening, something for you guys to think about too, especially like I would like to do it in the winter time or some other month that you can't really do like a longer swim because it's too cold.
I mean, another option, and this is something a swimmer did a few years ago, is making a more of an expedition out of it, and you do the short swims back to back to back. You go out to San Miguel, swim to Santa Rosa, then you take a boat around to the other end of Santa Rosa, swim over to Santa Cruz, get on a boat, swim, go over the other side of Santa Cruz. And so you can that makes it a little more affordable if you're doing these swims kind of as part of the same adventure. It's one boat hire. You get the same observers. So that's another option, just to make a little more financial sense, I guess.
We can do it, Karina. Let's do it.
I know part of the problem for me is I don't associate fun with marathon swimming. So I'm like, that sounds too fun. So there's something wrong.
Okay. So what about, starting at Anacapa and then kind of migrating north and west in the channel, the next island you get to is Santa Cruz. What's that swim like? I guess all three of us have done it, but we'll ask Karina.
I think Santa Cruz is a great swim and it's just not widely known. I feel like we should definitely have more Santa Cruz swimmers. We didn't have one this past year. We had one the year before. So I'd really like to see more people come out and do Santa Cruz. It's, you have the option to go Santa Cruz to Oxnard or Santa Cruz to Santa Barbara. So going to Oxnard That's about 19 miles, and going to Santa Barbara is around 23. So those are solid distances, great if you're training for something bigger, a great experience. And you will have some, challenging conditions depending on the day. So I'd really like to see more people do Santa Cruz.
So if we were to talk about Anacapa and the Catalina Channel and Santa Cruz, where do those three swims rank in terms of their difficulty?
I think Santa Cruz might be the most challenging just because it could have, likely has cooler temperatures than Catalina and potentially tougher conditions most days, and then Catalina and then Anacapa.
Yeah, I agree. So I think Santa Cruz to Oxnard is a pretty similar distance to Catalina, but the conditions are more like Anacapa. So like if you've done Catalina and you're looking for a similar distance but tougher conditions, that would be one way to do it. And then going to Santa Barbara and you're adding another 4 miles, I think. And you're further to the west in the channel, so tougher conditions. And I don't think that one has been done in a long time. Like probably someone finishing in Santa Barbara from Santa Cruz, I think maybe 2010 was the last time that's been done.
Yeah, it's been not since I've been on the board.
For people that may be newer to the sport, you guys should watch the movie Driven. It's about swimming in this area in the Santa Barbara Channel, and it features 3 swimmers. 2 of the swimmers do the swim from Anacapa to mainland, and the third swimmer, Evan Morrison, does the swim from Santa Cruz to mainland. And it's actually just like a really great overview, and it's beautifully done. They interview a lot of different people in the sport, and I think they do a really good job of showing the variety of types of experiences you can have. But something that stuck out to me watching it as a brand new swimmer, I hadn't done any marathon swims before when I saw it the first time, but was like Evan just had a really shitty conditions day. Like it was just like, seems like it was like a washing machine or something like that. But when I got to do the swim years later, both Karina and Evan were actually the observers and were there, but I had like the most easiest, most magnificent, loveliest day with a nice following breeze. Dolphins, great, amazing crew. Just everything went exactly my way. And so just, never really know what you're going to get.
This is true. I had a horrible day, and that's captured on film for eternity. But I'm glad, it's like Kevin Murphy says, I hate doing marathon swims, but I love having done them.
I like that. And Jessica, on your day, set the female speed record, right, for that swim?
Yeah. So for people listening, that you could go for that record. Yeah. I think so. Evan, you set the record in the movie, right? And then.
Yeah. I set the record, and then less than a year later, Jim McConaughey broke it. No disrespect to Jim. He had a much nicer day.
I mean, my view on records is that they're supposed to get broken, they're there and then somebody comes along and moves that notch down a little bit and then someone else comes, and that's just one way that the sport evolves, and it's just kind of exciting to watch. But it did feel exciting for that to happen. And I wasn't expecting it either because, like I said, I wasn't expecting to have such a lovely day helping me out.
So Santa Cruz is known as the jewel of the Channel Islands. It's just a spectacular piece of land. It's actually larger than Catalina Island. So Catalina is much better known than Santa Cruz, but Santa Cruz is bigger. So actually one interesting potential swim that has been done as a relay, but I think could be done as a solo by a really ambitious swimmer is going around Santa Cruz Island. And honestly, I cannot imagine a more beautiful swim than going around the circumference of Santa Cruz Island. I've been along most of that coast observing different swims, and I was there on my own swim in the middle of the night, so I didn't really see it, but it's really an incredible place.
So I took the Island Packers boat out to Santa Cruz the day before one of the banquets, and I got there and I immediately started walking in one direction, and I knew there was like a certain amount of time before the boat then takes you back, so I sort of timed it like half the time I walked in one direction, turned around and walked back. And it was the most beautiful place. And it was so remote that, like as soon as I got away from everyone else that was dropped off by the boat, it was just me walking on this path for hours. And it really is beautiful.
And the islands are so undeveloped, unlike most of California. So if you want to see what California looked like 500 years ago, going out to the Channel Islands is kind of a cool way to do it because it's untouched, right? Except for Catalina is the developed one, and then the other islands have a couple national park outposts, but most of it is just totally untouched.
And they have these little foxes, the island fox. They're so cute. And they're small because they've evolved on to live on an island so that it's a smaller environment, and so is a smaller fox. That they're super cute, and they're running like kind of everywhere. They're sort of like squirrels.
Yeah,
So you get
they're
to
not
see
afraid of people
yeah.
anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that I was going to mention the island foxes, and so many people around here go out to Santa Cruz for camping, backpacking, hiking. And my first time out there was actually for my swim, again in the middle of the night, so you don't get to see anything. But then since then, I have been back and done, a day hike and the kayaking trip, and it's really beautiful. But it's one of those things that since I live here, sometimes you don't take advantage of what's in your backyard. So I definitely need to make more trips out to the different Channel Islands.
So, Karina, let's move on to talking about your Santa Rosa swim. So, first of all, when did you know you were going to do this? Like, how far in advance did you plan, or like when did you commit, or like get the boat deposit sent in and all that?
So I was thinking about this swim. I mean, it had been on my mind just because I live here and, I've been doing most of my swims in this area. I've done 2 Tahoe swims and then I did the Manhattan swim in 2024. But otherwise, I haven't traveled much for my swims. And this swim for me was going to be my biggest challenge so far. So it was at the end of the year in 2024 when it was bouncing around and like I was needing to commit. And then I arranged with the captain in around February. So I was confirming it in the early part of the year that I was going to attempt it.
How did you know that you were ready? Because this is just a rarely ever swum or even attempted swim. How did you know that it was like time to go for it?
Yeah, I realized that I might be training for a swim that I may not complete, but I decided, well, I need to try. I would regret not trying, and it was a good point for me to try it. I was able to spend the time training, put aside the money to pay for it as well. So, and I was excited to have a swim that was going to challenge me more. So I was really prepared for it to be the hardest swim I've done. And as it turns out, it wasn't just because of the conditions that day. I guess the mental preparation was, okay, this will be my most challenging swim and I want to see what I can do.
So I think you touched on something that might be one indicator of people being ready to try a harder swim. And that's that, like, you were hungry for a challenge. Like, you wanted to be challenged more than past swims. Like, and it sounds like you were curious. You're like, what happens if I try this?
Yeah, I was thinking, this is going to be my longest in terms of duration. I was prepared for up to 20 hours, which, for me definitely would have beat my previous longest duration.
What
So
was
I
your
really wanted
previous
to,
longest duration?
that would be the double Anacapa, which was a little over 13 hours.
Yeah.
That one I had 2 DNFs leading up to that successful one. So that was satisfying to finally make it. But I was pretty certain this one was going to be significantly longer, at least, 4 or 5 hours longer.
Yeah. So part of your mental preparation was to face the fact it might be a DNF. Is it who was it that said anything worth doing is worth overdoing?
I believe it was originally Mick Jagger. In the marathon swimming world, it's David Berra is best known for that.
Okay, well my slogan's going to be anything worth doing is worth DNFing.
I like it.
So if it's a really hard swim, there should at least be a chance that you're going to DNF. I'm not saying you should try to DNF, obviously, but even like take on something that's so far outside of what you think your capability is that you're almost certainly going to DNF.
Mhm.
But I feel like if it's a worthy challenge, like there's that thing of like, might not finish this. And with the amount of money and time and effort on everyone's part that goes into these, it's a lot more challenging to face that possibility and sign up anyway for us as swimmers than it is for like ultra runners that might have, a race, much comparatively smaller race fee in a huge event. Like, I might not finish this 100-miler, versus everything that we have to do these solo swims.
Yeah, that's definitely a factor thinking about. Even though I was accepting the fact that I might have a DNF, it still is hard to think about the time and effort and the resources and then my support crew's time and effort and the money. It's a big factor. It's a reality of our sport. It's expensive when you get to doing this type of swim.
Yeah. So why do you think only 4 people have completed it?
That's a good question. I think mostly because it's just not very well known.
Yeah, it's like very much it's off the beaten path and an established route. It's not like just making up a whole new route. But why else? I mean, people have tried it and not completed it.
And I think, yeah, it's the conditions out there that, like we were talking about, you can spend all this time, get all the resources, get the boat all organized. And especially if you're traveling from out of the area and you have a window and it's just bad in that window, then you miss out. So I feel fortunate to be local where I have a little more flexibility. And that's part of the reason why I've just focused on this area for my swims.
I agree. I think it's just not very well known. I think, let's just say Santa Rosa Island, and if you go outside, people who live in the area, I don't think hardly anybody knows about it. And really, you can hardly even from Goleta, which is the closest part of the mainland, you can hardly see it on most days. So yeah, I think I mean, that's one of the motivations of this podcast episode, is to just get the word out. This is an incredibly beautiful part of the world, which has some incredibly interesting and challenging swimming to be done, which in the case of this swim has only been done 4 times. So you're still, if you go out there, you'd be one of the very few. But I think another thing, like, this is regrettable. I think there's so much list chasing in the sport nowadays. So people are only considering the swims that are famous, that are on these lists that people create, and Santa Rosa is like it's not on a big list. It's not like on the Ocean 7, so people just don't even think about it because it's all about the lists. I think that's regrettable, and I think I look at people going out and trying these rarely done swims that aren't on lists, and they're chasing their own lists, and I kind of respect that more, honestly.
Yeah, we have a lot of people who travel to California for swims. They come here for Catalina from all over the world, and I feel like Lake Tahoe is pretty popular too. So we are hoping to just get more attention to our islands here because it's such a great place to swim, and there's really a wide variety of routes for whatever you want to do.
Quick plug for the dolphins. When we're on the boat on the way out to Santa Cruz, I just remember that me and my partner Dan were like, "Oh my God, it's a dolphin! My gosh, look, another dolphin!" For those of us that live inland and we don't get to enjoy marine life very often, it's a real treat to get to swim with dolphins. I mean, some people go to resorts and pay money to swim with dolphins. We get to just have that be a part of our marathon swim, and the chances of having dolphins in the Santa Barbara Channel are a lot higher than in Catalina. I've had dolphins on every single Santa Barbara Channel swim that I've done.
Yeah, and I'd say of the swims I observed, Anacapa, Santa Cruz, different routes, dolphins were present sometime on the swim, more often than not. I mean, I think the majority of the swims I was on had dolphins, which is kind of incredible, right? I mean, the channel is so huge, and like, it just happened across, because they're very curious animals. So I think when they have a sense that there's something unusual going on there's like a human in the water swimming really slowly next to this boat, so they come check it out. And sometimes it's just a few, and sometimes you'll get a pod of several hundred dolphins. I think it's really, really special every time that happens.
Okay, so speaking of the forecast, what can people expect in terms of water temperature? So for those of us that are a little frightened of long swims in cold temperatures, is that a thing here? What normally happens, or what should people be prepared for?
So I was always aiming to do the swim in September because that was likely going to be the most comfortable time of year. And I was trying to prepare myself for low 60s, thinking 62. If it's 62, that's really good for that area. So I was prepared for low 60s, and it turns out on my day, it was more like mid 60s. So there were definitely some cooler spots, but overall it was much more comfortable than I expected, and I didn't really have an issue there. But that's definitely something that I was a little concerned about, just because most of my long swims have been in more, mid 60s, more comfortable temperatures.
It seems pretty comparable then to like what you might expect as an English Channel swimmer swimming anytime other than like mid-August, or, like, I think as an English Channel swimmer, you should be ready to swim in 64 or less. For sure, like 58 to 64, maybe.
I think so.
It's not too different. It's not like, oh my gosh, it's going to be 58 or under and you better be ready. Like, it's okay. So how did you feel when the weather forecast came out for your swim?
I know, it is crazy because you choose this date in January or February. You have no idea what the weather's going to be like in September. So it wasn't looking good for the week of my swim. And we actually had, another swimmer scheduled for the following week. So it was stressful because I was going back and forth each day. The captain was very flexible and easy to communicate with. And he was very relaxed because during the week he had a lot of flexibility. On the weekends he didn't, but during the week he did, which I really appreciated. But the week I was supposed to do the swim, it was pretty ugly out there. Really high winds. And the captain was willing to go out, but it was a really high chance that I wasn't going to be able to stay in for too long or finish it. And I don't even remember exactly what the conditions were. Do you might remember a little better from our conversation?
Yeah, so actually I screenshotted that because I was looking at it, Karina, really, like don't do this to yourself. But I didn't want to say that unless, because I don't live there. I don't spend a lot of time out there. But what I've got here on this screen capture is 31 knot gusts. Okay. And like 23 knot sustained winds. The problem was it was like that Monday, Tuesday, like there was a tiny little few hour break on Wednesday, but it was like there wasn't really like a good window in there where it was going to like settle down for you. And I was just like, I remember I was making coffee and talking on the phone. I had this like sinking feeling. I was like, no, but I also wanted to be really encouraging. And I knew if anyone could do it, you would be able to do it. So I didn't want to be like, you can't do this. But I also didn't want you to try when it was going to be like horrible.
It was a really hard week because I remember that week I was just so stressed and frustrated and sad and not knowing what to do because part of you is like, well, I want to be tough. I want to go out there and do it. Like I expected bad conditions. I mean, I was preparing for bad conditions, but this just seemed a little beyond that. And, I had flashbacks to my double Anacapa attempts and having that window and moving it, you're ready for the day. It's the worst time, the worst feelings like leading up to the swim. You just want to get in the water and start, but all those, couple days before is just really stressful. And then I have, all my really supportive friends here, so it's awesome. But, I'm trying to explain to people and my non-swimming friends too, and they don't really understand how all of this works. And of course, everyone wants you to be safe, but I was thinking, like, I do have flexibility because I live here. So I'm not traveling. I had some flexibility with my work schedule. My supervisor was really supportive. And I had flexibility with my crew. So I have my amazing swim buddies here who either had flexible work schedules or they're retired. I have my dad who's my kayaker who's retired. So luckily I had a flexible crew as well, because that's the other thing. You're trying to line up 5 people's schedules. And then I was getting stressed about my mom had prepared some like snacks and food. I'm like, oh, that's going to go bad. And just she was able to preserve the stuff and we planned it accordingly. So as you can see, I have really great support. But I just remember thinking like, why do I do this again? Why do I put myself through this? Because it's really just stressful, and you think about all the time you've spent training, all the money you've spent, and that it might not happen. And I was even thinking, well, maybe I'm going to do a swim. If it's not this one, I'm going to do something. So maybe I'll do the other Santa Cruz route. I haven't done that yet, but luckily I had the flexibility to wait it out a little bit and go the following week.
Yeah, and so what happened then with the forecast? How did the weather change over the course of that week?
So then the following week, it was like the best day ever out in that channel. It was like a once a year kind of day. And one of my swim team buddies, her husband works in weather, and she was able to send me this really kind of detailed image of what the wind was going to look like. And I'm not super well versed in reading all that. I had a little bit of a crash course that week, but normally I don't do a ton of that myself. I kind of just, usually it's good enough for me to swim, but it was unbelievably good that Tuesday. And that was actually the other swimmer's window. So she picked the right week back in the early part of the year. And so we ended up both swimming on that same day, which I think is pretty remarkable given only 2 other people had done the swim previously. And that was in 2008 and 2018. And then all of a sudden we have 2 people in the same year and then on the same day.
Oh.
But it was great conditions that day.
Yeah, and and the other swimmer was Kim Hedges, and you
Mhm.
guys both completed the swim, which was like amazing and remarkable.
So I was following both of the swims that were happening off Santa Rosa. That it was the middle of the night for you, but it was during the day for me in Australia. So I kind of was able to watch the beginning, and um, I think it's fair to say, Karina, you're quite a bit faster swimmer than Kim, and you both started around the same time. But Kim kind of shot off the island really quickly, and then you were kind of stuck there at the island for a little while, a couple hours, like just making really slow progress, and all of a sudden, so I have no idea actually what happened there. Do you? Can you tell us what was going on?
So she started her swim around 10 p.m. and then I started around 1 a.m. So I was out there a few hours after her and just, I remember that start was just really creepy because it was super dark out there. And even though the weather was great, it was a very overcast, dark night. We couldn't even light up the island. So it was just swimming towards the darkness in foam. There was all this foam and kelp. So it was kind of creepy. And I remember jumping in and thinking, why am I doing this? I need to get out of here. But I thought about Kim because I knew she had just been out there. I knew she was on her way. So I'm like, okay, Kim did this. She made it to the island. And so finally, I, got away from the island. And I actually felt pretty crappy the first few hours, just a little off. And like, why do I feel bad? It's only the early part of the swim. And the conditions were pretty flat. So I had asked my crew, like I told them that I want to know that I've gone like whatever it was, 6 miles. I don't want to know when I've gone, 15 miles. I had the points. I didn't want them to tell me every time. But of course, I know what my general pace is. So after 3 hours, I was waiting to hear from them that I had gone 6 miles. And they didn't say anything at 3 hours. And then 3.5 hours comes, take my feed. They didn't say anything. I'm like, okay, what's going on? Are they forgetting? So then 4 hours comes and I'm like, haven't I gone 6 miles yet? And they said, yeah, you almost like I'm just approaching 6 miles. So that really threw me off for a bit because Jim was on the boat. He told me I had a really strong current against me and I was barely, I was probably swimming about 1 mile an hour. And that was a little discouraging, a little frustrating because I'm like, okay, wait, for a while, this looked like a 24-hour swim. Like, wait, I was training for a 20-hour swim, even though I know you can't really put a time in your head. I just thought, okay, well, this is what I signed up for. I have to keep going. But then the current did shift. It kind of got more neutral. And then I got a little more of a push along the way. So that was definitely concerning at the beginning.
That was my guess about what was happening. So what's interesting is the currents can actually be pretty strong right around the islands. And if you're there at the wrong part of the tide cycle, you can get stuck. And the same thing happened to me actually on my Santa Cruz swim. There's a really strong current coming off of the island and I just made very little progress. But then once I got out into the channel, it was more like my actual swimming speed. And so that was my guess. And you said you were there 3 hours after Kim. I think she just was there at a different part of the tide cycle and it didn't have that same current. But then once you got out into the main channel, you could swim at a more typical speed. I think there must be a way of predicting these sorts of things, but I never figured it out while I was involved in those. And also there's how many Santa Rosa swims actually happen every year? I think on average you get one we had 4 over the course of like 16 or 17 years at this point. So they're pretty rare sorts of things.
How many attempts have there been? Do you guys know?
There was a relay that was successful.
But other than that one, no other
I don't know.
attempts that you guys recall?
I'd have to look at our sheet, but
there have been a number of San Miguel attempts that were unsuccessful, but I think more than Santa Rosa actually for some reason.
That's kind of funny because the distance, they're pretty similar in distance because Santa Rosa is 27.5, San Miguel is around 25. But Santa Rosa just being a little further south, it's like, okay, chances are it might be a tad warmer, maybe a little less rough. So it might actually, would you say tends to be a little easier than San Miguel?
I think so. Yeah. It's just San Miguel is like, I guess we'll get into this a little bit later, but it's right there on the edge of everything. I mean, it's getting exposed to winds and ocean currents that are coming from Northern California.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Santa Rosa is kind of more in the middle, like proper Santa Barbara Channel. That's my kind of.
I also have this theory that when swims are less known about, that probably distorts their finish to attempt ratio because like lots of people attempt the English Channel because it's very famous. Even if they're beginners, they might even attempt, even though it's not really a beginner swim. But then if you're going to attempt Santa Rosa or San Miguel, I feel like you would have to kind of be in the know since not that many people know about it. So maybe it's even harder to complete these swims than it seems like it is from the ratio. Like it might even, like if we had people attempting the English Channel attempt either of those two swims, I bet you'd have a much lower success rate.
I think that's true. I think people going after Santa Rosa and San Miguel, they already know what they're getting into, or they have some, there's some local knowledge of what it's about. It's not just some like random person comes up with, oh, I'm going to swim from Santa Rosa.
Okay, yeah. So you mentioned that as you were swimming, your pace increased. Did the crew tell you that were you aware like, oh, I'm really picking up speed here? Or how did you feel mentally and physically?
Yeah, I was able to. So I always keep track of my feeds when I swim. I keep count. So I always know how much time has passed. So far, I've been able to keep track of it. And mentally on this swim, this was one of my best swims mentally. So it definitely helps when the conditions are really nice. I really would hope that I would still have a strong mental swim, even if the conditions were different that day. But it was really one of those swims where I was able to really appreciate it. Can be somewhat not negative, but just kind of neutral in the water. And I remember thinking, when the sun came up and it just the color of the water out there, I just remember thinking, I love this. Like, this is so special. And I'm here. My friends are on the boat. My dad's in the kayak. The boat captain that I had been working with, he last minute wasn't able to captain the boat, but he had someone else. He has multiple captains, and he did a great job. He hadn't piloted one of these swims before, and even the crew, it was all new for them, so they were just kind of blown away about what was happening. They tend to go on fishing expeditions. But he had a great course, and I was able to be close enough to the boat where I could see my friends and see what was going on. And at one point I was trying to make conversation with them and just like, how's it going? Or how are you guys? And this actually got caught on a little video, but Stacy said to Jim, it's like, wow, she asked, how are we? She never does that. Not that I don't not consider it or concerned about them, but I'm just usually not that chatty. And so that just showed, what a good place I was in. At the same time, physically early on, it was pretty rough. I was a little worried because I just wasn't feeling good for some reason, even though, I swim for, 3 hours all the time. Why am I feeling bad 3 hours into the swim? Not bad, but just not as good as I wanted to feel. But then around 5 hours, I got over that hump and I felt really strong. I felt like my training had prepared me to swim for a long time. I had a boost because I felt like, yeah, I can do this. I can swim for as long as I need to swim. I'm going to finish. And I ended up not having to swim for as long as I expected. And this swim, I'm very, proud of it. It was a great swim, but I also have this feeling of a little bit dissatisfied. I don't want to be ungrateful for what I had with the conditions, but I really thought this was going to be a swim that I really had to fight for. And I don't want to minimize it because these swims are hard no matter what. And it's just hard to swim for a long time. But this wasn't the swim that really scratched that itch for me like I thought it would be. I really wanted to be closer to 18 hours. I haven't done a swim that's, again, my longest swim before that was 13 hours. So I really wanted to ramp it up a little bit and see if I could get closer to that 20-hour mark and just see what that would feel like. And that just wasn't the day for that.
Yeah, so now you know that it's time to do another swim. But yeah, what an interesting observation, though, that in almost any sport I can think of, including most open water swimming, people are like, oh my gosh, I went a really good time and extremely excited about that, which I can tell you are. You set a record. It was a really fast time. But there's something about, I think, our sport where we're like, oh, wow, I only swum for 14 hours. That's not as good as 20 hours.
I know.
I don't know any other sport that thinks that way. That's funny. What did it feel like when you came ashore? What was like the last, 10 or 15 minutes when you start seeing the bottom or you get closer? What was that feeling like?
That feeling is always one of the best feelings. And I feel like, as swimmers can all agree on that when you start to see the bottom and just know you're going to be done soon. And at that point, I knew I was on track to set the record, and that was exciting. Again, that's not what I was doing it for, but I'm like, well, if I get a good day, then it's possible, but that's not my motivation for doing the swims. Like I was saying, I was hoping this would be one where I had to push for longer. But I had a surprise with some of my swim. So I had friends on the boat, but then I had some swim team friends who not all of them even do open water swimming. They came to the beach, which it's a pretty hard beach to access, Coal Oil Point, but the parking isn't accessible. Like you have to walk 20 minutes from your car to the beach. And I finished in the middle of the day, and I had about 6 people there to greet me, which was really surprising. I didn't think I would have anyone on the beach. And so that was really special.
Oh, that's awesome.
And then I had to get back in, and I'm like, I still feel pretty good. Like I could have kept swimming. So I got on the boat. They're like, are you okay? Are you cold? No, I'm good. I felt like I really was prepared for, I trained for that swim. Again, it really helps to have the calmer conditions. But yeah, it was a great day. I'm really appreciative of that day and to have that beautiful swim. This, I guess, means I have to give myself another challenge.
I was going to say, are you going to, there's four islands in a row there, Karina. Are you going to do San Miguel, the 4th one that you haven't done yet? That no one has done all 4? You don't have to answer. It's okay.
It's tempting, but I've noticed that, maybe 2 years ago I would have felt more competitive around that, to be like, oh, that would be awesome to be the first. And now I do feel like San Miguel is something I definitely want to try. Again, just living here and that being my backyard, I feel like, it would be great to be that person. But I don't know if that's in the cards for this year. I'm still figuring that out. And like, this time last year, I definitely knew I was doing Santa Rosa. But yeah, I just have some other things going on, and I'm going to see. But if not now, one day.
When these swims go really well, there's just not a lot of dramatic storytelling.
I know. And I wanted a better story than that. But
you've had some tough swims, so I think
my double Anacapa was definitely my tougher.
You were owed a nice day here, so.
Well, that was one thing I was going to say is in my group, we talk about the channel gods and paying our dues to the channel gods when we're training. So when you're out there on those tough days, on the really bumpy days at Seaward, we're paying our dues to the channel gods. We're trying to please the channel gods so that they smile upon us on our swim day. So they definitely do. They weren't smiling upon me the first week, but they definitely smiled upon me the following week.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah. So Santa Rosa is the longest route across the Santa Barbara Channel. It's about 28 miles. There's one island further to the, I know intuitively we like to say north, but it's actually west in the channel. That coast there is a south-facing coast. So San Miguel Island is the kind of the furthest out there to the west, and generally the coldest, the windiest, most kind of large creatures out there. It's a little bit shorter than Santa Rosa by about a mile, but I think actually effectively that's only if you hit the closest point of land. And because the currents tend to be pretty strong out there, you're not going to hit the closest point of land. And so because the coast there kind of goes up a little bit, it ends up effectively being a longer swim than the shortest line. And the one swim that has been successful from San Miguel was Penny Palfrey back in 2009, I think. And this was before my time with the SBCSA, but my understanding is she had an absolutely spectacular day, kind of like the one that Karina had for Santa Rosa. And after that, we've had a number of unsuccessful attempts off of San Miguel, and not even like swims that got close, like swims that were like not even close to finishing. They were unsuccessful after a number of hours and were not even halfway across the channel. So this is, I think, San Miguel to the California mainland, I would consider to be one of the hardest swims in the world among swims that have been done before. The combination of cold conditions, distance, it's just a very, very challenging sort of swim.
What can people expect in terms of water temperature? Like when we're saying challenging cold, can you guys say a little bit more about what you've seen with the temperatures out there, or what your general understanding is?
It's not just the overall temperature on average, I think, is colder than the rest of the Channel Islands region, but also I think it's more variable. So I think
that's hard on the body to go up and down and up and down. That's hard.
Yeah, the most recent attempt it wasn't off of San Miguel Island. I think it was someone attempted to swim from the mainland out to San Miguel Island. And he was swimming, I think, in the nicest time of year, and he had well under 60 degrees. We're talking 50, 56, 57 degrees. So, I mean, that's tough for that distance.
Mm-hmm.
Karina, what are your thoughts? I mean, as this is a swim you're actually considering, so what
You guys might have made my decision for me with this.
how are you thinking about it? No, I think you should do it, and you are capable of doing it. But
You're qualified.
I mean, this is a significant undertaking. How are you thinking about it?
Well, part of me has thought, I got the amazing conditions, the channel gods smiled upon me for Santa Rosa. Like, are they really going to be that generous again? So I feel like if I took on San Miguel, that would definitely be the type of swim where I'd have to really fight for it. And I do remember being on an observation. I've been out there one time on an observation that, didn't complete. And just when the swimmer got in the water and we couldn't even get that close to the island, and it was rough enough to where the boat pilot didn't want to put a kayaker in. And so the swimmer got into that water, swam towards that dark little island all by herself. And I was just like, I am so glad I'm on the boat right now.
Yeah,
And
we were both there, right? That was
yep.
We were the two observers. That was
It's a scary,
oh,
scary
and then
swim.
and then speaking of the channel gods, so she got back on the boat, and of course the boat was harbored back in Oxnard. So to get out to San Miguel Island from Oxnard, we had traveled all the way across the length of the channel for a nighttime start. And then she gets in and she swims for several hours, and then get back on the boat and have to go all the way back to Oxnard. But by this time, it's now daytime, and the channel just smoothed out, and it was like perfect conditions. And she's just gotten out. So it's like, it seemed really bad there in the middle of the night, but then kind of this channel gods decided to spite all of us, really, and just give us this beautiful, beautiful morning when we're motoring back. And I think that was just a
That was a tough
very
one.
interesting couple of. I mean, really, like you're talking about motoring all the way out to San Miguel from Oxnard and then motoring all the way back. Even for just a few hours of swimming, we were out there for well over 24. I want to say more like 36
It took
hours.
us around 10 hours to get to the island. We were on a sailboat. We weren't
Yeah.
sailing, but we were on a sailboat. And it took a very long time. We got the island cruise, and the swimmer was seasick along the way. I felt so bad for her because that's just not a great way to start your swim, being all depleted. But yeah, that definitely has stuck with me. And it's a swim that I was talking about being prepared to have a DNF for. Accepting the fact that I might have a DNF for Santa Rosa, I would definitely have to keep that same mindset for San Miguel. And I feel like to prepare for that, I definitely have to do some longer, colder swims. And I can train in cold water here. We have, in the summertime though, once it starts to warm up, I'm not getting that same cold water exposure. So that would kind of concern me a little bit, because where I tend to train at in the summertime, it'll be mid 60s. And I think I would want to be prepared for under 60 for San Miguel. So I would be worried about not being able to keep up that cold water training throughout the
Come visit me in Oregon. We'll go to the coast where it's like 48 to 54 all
God.
summer long.
Whew.
Or we'll just go to San Francisco. But it still might be too warm there, huh, in the summer?
Inside the bay, it would probably not be cold enough for her, but out on the coast, like on the Pacific Ocean, somewhere around there, like down in Pacifica or up in Bodega Bay or something, probably get some nice cold water. So I think what we're trying to do here is now go through the toughest, longest, most extreme routes in the California Channel Islands. So Santa Rosa is very tough and very extreme. There are actually more extreme routes available. We just covered San Miguel. There are two islands that are so far offshore that you pretty much cannot see them from the mainland. Apparently you can. So San Clemente is one of them. And I think on certain days, maybe once a year at the most, you can see San Clemente from Orange County. But it's basically a big island on the other side of Catalina. Go to Catalina, and then there's another island about 20 miles beyond that. San Clemente is owned by the U.S. Navy, and San Nicolas is even further out, kind of out beyond Santa Barbara Island. And San Nicolas, I think, can never be seen from the mainland. You can go up high in the Malibu mountains, and I think you can see it from there. But aside from that, it's so far out there that you cannot see it from the mainland. The challenge with these two swims, aside from the massive distances, is that it's very hard to actually get permission to do the swim. Both islands are owned by the Navy, and so you're not only having to organize with the Santa Barbara Channel Swimming Association, you have a much larger and more powerful organization, the Navy, the United States government, that you have to deal with to even get permission. Karina, in the time since I've left the board, has there been any interest in either of these swims?
No, we haven't had anyone ask us about those swims, but we have been trying to do some research about how we could support a swimmer who was interested in doing those swims and seeing if we can get a contact, someone in the Navy who could help us sort that out. It's really tough. And also thinking even if we got a contact now, well, then that might change by the time we have someone who's interested. So that's definitely something we're thinking about and trying to find ways to accommodate those, that rare swimmer that wants to take that on.
The most recent successful attempt was Dave Loeffler swam from San Clemente Island into the back of Catalina Island. So that's a way to, swim off San Clemente without having to go all the way to the mainland, which is more like a 50-mile swim. Swimming to the back of Catalina is about 20 miles, maybe 20, 22, 23 miles. Dave had the advantage of being he was a former Navy SEAL. Is that right, Jess?
Yep.
Yeah, so he had existing connections within the Navy and managed to get permission, and he was able to land right there at the main pier on San Clemente Island and actually had a send-off from soldiers stationed there on the island, which is pretty awesome.
It was also raising money for a nonprofit that actually helps veterans get into surfing. And so his contact through his nonprofit actually had closer connections to the Navy than Dave had at that point. And so he was able to work with them and get a window set up. But then I think maybe the weather was bad or something happened and it had to be rescheduled. But then rescheduling it was challenging. And there were quite a few logistics involved that swimmers normally don't have to deal with. Like normally it's like, this is your window, you're going to go with this window. Or maybe in Karina's case, you can reschedule, but rescheduling with the Navy, or maybe the Navy decides to reschedule you because they have something that they're doing that doesn't allow for the swim to start. And then you would have to reschedule with the boat and the observers. Anyway, it worked out for him. And yeah, like Kevin said, he got a send off, but he did start the swim not at the closest point to Catalina on the island. He actually started where they needed him to be, because I think they're doing some kind of weapons testing over on the side of the island that would be most convenient to start at for a swimmer. And so they were like, hey, you really need to start at this spot. And so he did. And he swam extra miles more than the minimum route distance, but that was necessary to coordinate with what our Navy is doing to serve our country. So I think that makes a lot of sense.
And so San Clemente, I think, is a little trickier even than San Nicolas, because in San Clemente they do weapons testing. And so there's actually a strictly held security perimeter around the island. So San Nicolas is further offshore. It's more like about 60 to 65 miles, depending on where you start from. But they don't do weapons testing. It's still owned by the Navy, but I think if anything, it might be a little easier to get permission for St. Nicholas. There's more kind of biological, ecological research out there rather than active military exercises. Karina's group, the Deep Enders, have done the only successful swim off of St. Nicholas as a relay back in 2014.
It was 2015. So I had started swimming with them in 2012, 2013, and then I left to go to St. Louis for grad schools. I was gone for 2 years and then came back in 2015, just a couple months before they did the swim. So I was still there. I was there to kind of train with them the last few months. Thinking about it now, I'm like, I still swim with all these people who were on the relay. I'm still seeing them regularly, and I actually don't know how they the details of how they got that organized, but I do have access to talk to people who actually organized a swim there. I remember one of their big concerns was where the elephant seals off the island. There's apparently a lot of them, so our buddy Zach had to be the first one in the water. But yeah, they were able to organize that.
And then to my knowledge, there have been 2 other swims that got permission to swim off of San Nicolas. Sarah Thomas was going to swim to the mainland. She got permission, but there were some issues with the weather and the pilot that she hired, and she was not even able to go out there, much less get in the water. But she did have that. She did get permission, which I think is, for that swim, a huge barrier. And then another swimmer got permission to swim from San Nicolas to Santa Santa Barbara Island as a solo. And he was able to get in the water, cleared the water on San Nicolas and started swimming in the middle of the night and swam for not very long, a couple of hours, I think. And then he was sick or something, not feeling well. So I'm not aware of anything since then. But I think if someone did manage to get permission and do a solo from San Nicolas to the mainland, it would have to be one of the greatest marathon swims of all time. So the other island, this part of Channel Islands National Park, the most remote is Santa Barbara Island, which is, I think the shortest point is 37 miles, but realistically, probably the best finish point is at, close to where the Catalina Channel swim finishes, which is more like 40 miles off of Santa Barbara Island. Santa Barbara Island is essentially this tiny little rock, and I shouldn't speak any more about it because Jessica's the one who's done this swim. What was that like out there?
Well, that was another good weather day for us. So the bottom scratcher piloted that swim for me. Captain Kevin was extremely accommodating to me and the rest of the crew, which was Karina was there and Dave Van Meerwick was there observing. And so we actually left the mainland in the evening around the time that like 8 or 9 when people normally leave for Catalina swims. We all went to sleep on the boat. It took like 4 or 5 hours to get to the island. And then we woke up and we all just sat around enjoying the morning. It was the most relaxed start of a marathon swim that I've ever seen. The water was beautiful. It was super glassy. There were some seals or some kind of pinnipeds swimming around, enjoying their breakfast. Bright blue sky, bright blue water. There's actually a little arch on that island too where we started. I think that there was a relay actually that went from that arch to the Anacapa arch, or maybe it was the Anacapa arch back to that one, but there's an arch there at this tiny little island. It's got that very, very, very remote feeling. It really does feel like you're kind of in the middle of nowhere because there's nothing around. And so I started the swim in the morning, swam for, all day. And I think around dusk or somewhere in there, we passed Catalina. Like I could see Catalina when we were passing it. It's like, it's another 20 miles past Catalina, basically, is where it is. And then at night, we had these dolphins, and they were very curious. And I mean, like, there was a whole pod, but a pair of them kept coming up within inches of me. Like, I had to retract my hands away from my normal stroke to avoid touching them. And they sort of came and went all night long. Now, like as we approached land, we encountered the same types of currents that you sometimes get when you approach land at Catalina. So people who've been on a lot of Catalina swims know that, when you're swimming into Palos Verdes, you can sometimes just swim right in and you carry your same pace, or you hit kind of a wall sometimes. And so this was a wall situation where Kevin thought we were going to arrive at like 4:30 a.m. And I think we started around 8 or something. And Kevin was starting to get, sort of like, oh God, what are we going to do if we have to finish at night and it's dark and there'll be surge and rocks and all of this stuff. But then we hit this kind of wall, and then it took an extra 4 hours to get into the land. Instead of it was good looking like a 20-hour swim, it became a 24-hour swim. So even though I think other islands are known, the more outer islands, like Evan was saying, the west and north islands are known for their cross currents and gnarly conditions. Sometimes you get weird things happening down there by Palos Verdes too, with whatever unpredictable current sort of slows you to a stop for reasons that Kevin says nobody really understands.
That was amazing to be part of that swim and be on the boat. And it was really cool to see the island because so many of these swims we start in the dark. And it was just, I have a picture that I'm thinking of, and it was just really a beautiful start being able to see that island.
So Jess is one of 2 to go to the mainland from Santa Barbara Island. The first was Penny Palfrey. There was one successful relay, I think, to the mainland, but also 2 people have gone around Santa Barbara Island, which is only about 5 miles. I can't imagine taking a boat all the way out there and doing a 5-mile swim, but it's been done. A couple people and a couple relays have gone from Santa Barbara Island over to Catalina, which is about a 24-mile swim. Jess mentioned the relay that's gone from Santa Barbara Island to Anacapa, and really, like any given island out there, you could go to the mainland, you can go around it, you can go to another island. Ken Mignosa swam from the edge of San Miguel Island all the way along the coast of Santa Rosa Island and finished all the way almost at the end of Santa Cruz Island. The possibilities are virtually endless. I think both of you have probably thought about your own different ideas of swimming out there. What do you think? Different possibilities, different creative routes that you could do.
I mean, something that's kind of cool about an island is that, so we've mainly been talking, as Evan said, about channel crossings. But if you have a large island like Catalina or Santa Cruz, you know, typically people are looking at circumnavigations around islands. But what if you don't want to swim 50 miles? You know, what if you want to experience the island, but you would rather swim 25 miles? So you could do half of the island as a point-to-point shoreline swim at the island. And then you could come back later and do the other half if you wanted to.
Yeah, I mean, just swimming the back half or the front half of Santa Cruz Island would be a solid 25-mile swim.
Yeah, exactly.
It's totally beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, like, why? I mean, I say this as somebody who, I'm personally really enjoying challenging myself with longer distances. This is like a sort of a personal project, but you don't have to do the swim all in one go if you don't want to. You can, but you don't have to. You could break that distance up into 3 different parts if you wanted to. Like, really, with channel swims, you actually do have to do the whole swim at once, because there's no way to mark where you've stopped, because a GPS point is so unreliable. You can't be like, well, I stopped here and then come back later and start before that point. But when you're dealing with on land, you could go from one landmark to another landmark and exit the water at both landmarks and be no problem. So, yeah. So, I mean, that might be a thing to do sometime.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of the half circumnavigation. That's a good idea. Do a little smiley face.
Well, this is another Dave Loeffler swim. He started at 2 harbors on the front side and swam around the west end of Catalina and into 2 harbors on the other side, or into whatever the other side of the isthmus is called.
Yeah, and what a great way to experience that part of the island.
Yeah, and he didn't have to get a Catalina Channel observer. Did it on his own, submitted it to MSF, and it's done.
Karina, thank you so much for joining us today. To everyone out there listening, we hope you've enjoyed the episode. We'd love to know what you thought. You can learn more about the Marathon Swimmers Federation and our other projects at ultraswimming.org, or follow us on social media, Marathon Swimmers Federation on Facebook and ultra_swimming on Instagram. Karina, if people want to learn more about the Santa Barbara Channel and the Santa Barbara Channel Swimming Association, where can they find you?
You can check out our website at santabarbarachannelswim.org, follow us on Instagram at SBCSA, and find us on Facebook at Santa Barbara Channel Swimming Association. And shout out to my deep benders and seaward swimmers.
Awesome. All right, everyone. Thanks for listening and happy swimming.